It is Wednesday, May 25th, and of 2022, and we are talking about reciprocity right now. And we're about halfway through. It's our fourth of eight talks about this. And today the theme is giving and receiving. And so I wanted to, it's such a huge, huge theme, and I wanted to break it down into these different aspects. And today I want to talk more specifically about what the actual exchange, the moment of exchange is. So far we've been acknowledging the power of reciprocity. We've been acknowledging that in reciprocal exchange, there seems to be two main parts, the self and another, and self and other. And we talked about a little bit about what those are. Last week, we talked about the importance of recognizing, okay, now I've got a self and I've got an other, and that each of them participate reciprocally because each of them are here because they have needs and they have gifts, because there's something to offer from the self to the other, and because there's a need to receive from the other to the self, and vice versa. Okay. And we talked in the last talk, I discussed, some of the challenges around just even acknowledging that we have needs, and the maybe slightly different challenges that we have around acknowledging that we have gifts, and starting to actually become aware of what these are so that we can begin to consciously participate in the giving and receiving from a place of awareness of what that giving and receiving is all about. As we are getting deeper into what ultimately, starting in this talk and definitely in the next couple of talks, we're going to be talking start to be talking very specifically about relationships, about your relationships with other humans. So far I've kind of talking about, we're modeling all of this on this relationship, on the relationships that we see in nature. But starting to specifically really dive into the social world, the human world, the places where when I asked you guys about where you struggled with reciprocity, or what you really wanted to talk about, or where your kind of growth edges were around this, everyone brought up challenges in relating to other human beings. And I want to say that, as I've been putting this material together, I've been thinking about all of the disparate places from which I've actually gathered my understanding, my sort of living body of knowledge that I'm walking around the world with as I engage with all the humans. Reflecting on from where am I standing, like what am I actually teaching here? And it really is a combination of just my observations about how nature and the natural world works, always a starting place for me. My understanding of non-dualist philosophy, which is the closest label that I could come up with to what I believe, what my sort of worldview, my perspective on how reality works here. And just to be clear, under that category of sort of non-dualist philosophy, I would include Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, my teacher, Lao Tzu, who wrote the Tao Te Ching, the Taoist principles to me all fit right in with this, and many of the non-dualist teachings that show up in various Eastern traditions and shamanic traditions in the Eastern and Western hemisphere. All of these agree on some really basic principles that are my founding principles for how I look at reality as well. And just kind of in a nutshell, I suppose I'll just kind of say, these founding principles come down to I am. I am. That's the first thing that I know. Um, I am. And that means I am awareness, right? That I have awareness is step one. I tend to have awareness of what is temporally and spatially close. I have awareness from an embodied perspective at a specific time, and from this specific, I have this kind of instrument, this embodied instrument that is distinct from awareness, but seems to house my awareness, at least for right now. Then through my awareness, through this instrument, which gave me, comes with eyes for, that see for some of us, ears that hear, and, the ability to touch, that through this, I become aware of an outer world. And this outer world is full of beings. I can think, and I can reason. And what I cannot understand or perceive directly through this sensory experience, I can make some causal jumps using my mind. I can take some leaps there. I can think my way to a kind of understanding. That understanding is going to be partial. That understanding is going to necessarily be partial because of this hookup that I have. And because all that I can really say I know for sure is I am awareness. Even once I start to get into this partial human hookup, there's faultedness. My eyes can actually only see less than 1% of the colors on the spectrum. My ears can only hear less than 1% of vibration, which is sound, there are other creatures that can access that, right? So basically, once I get beyond I am, I'm already into territory it's a little tricky, or it starts to get more and more removed from any kind of objective truth. Once I get into I think, I think things, I believe things, I have stories, it becomes even further removed from that original truth. And yet, here I am, I'm thinking, I do have an idea of how the world works, and I apply it. As it works, and then I adjust it as I go. Through my thinking, I am assuming that all of you here right now, and everyone that I'm going to meet today, are real. That you also are, that you also have awareness. I'm going to assume that you also have an inner world. I actually can't totally know that, which is interesting, and has led to all kinds of interesting philosophies about the nature of reality. But and I don't want to exclude any exceptions for people who have experiences, who really feel like they have experiences of I don't know, more sixth sense kind of experiences. There are definitely people who perceive things differently in time and space. I'll speak from my experience and the experience of most of the people that I work with and talk to. I cannot experience what's going on inside of someone else. I can and I do very much experience the ripple or the the, the ramifications of someone's, the way that someone sends their energy out into the world. Sure, you can be very subtle and sensitive and feel, even without someone saying or doing something, you might be able to feel that somebody's grumpy, or you might be able to we are, as social beings, we are co-regulating, we are kind of sending energy and messages, and this is true and biological and factual, right, that we do send many things on subtle levels between us. What I'm saying is, you cannot know, it is not your area of expertise, somebody else's inner world, and what's going on inside of somebody else. And this obviously leads to what seems like a lot of conflict, for can seem like that, but it is also the way out. There's also the way that we, understanding this, the limitedness, accepting the limitedness of what we actually know, what we actually can access, is the beginning of the, the freedom, the relief, the it's the solution to the problem, um, or at least points the way. Oh, I wanted to share one more principle from the non-dualist philosophy before I go more into this, but um, mm, because I am inherently valuable. No one else can give me, we've talked about this before, no one else can validate me. The universe did that already when it gave me awareness embodied in this form. That's a done deal. It's not up for discussion or negotiation. My right to be on this planet and my right to be in charge of my autonomous zone, my body, my inner world, my right to go on my life journey and develop and grow, is not anyone else's right to take away. And and like I said, we do this extension, and we develop it naturally. We do it naturally as we grow up, and it's very, very important. It's just to, if we want to be at peace in the world that we live in, to then extend that validation and autonomy, to assume that every other being here, that is true of them too. So these non-dualist philosophies are this not non-dualist principles are at the foundation of everything that I'm sharing about reciprocity. But I will also say that I have very much been influenced by a lot of modern psychology, by dabbling and studying in different relationship techniques. Nonviolent communication is a great one that I've done a little bit of training in, and a little bit of training in sort of how to mediate, how to hold space when there are beings in conflict. And I encourage you, as always, to bring into this discussion as we continue. We're continuing this discussion throughout the end of June, to bring in your principles and your influences. And if you read a great book about, as we start to get into things that are a little bit more about how do we communicate through conflict, how do we resolve conflict, how do we heal relationships where there is disagreement, this kind of thing. As we get into that nitty gritty, I really invite you to reflect on where does my relationship style come from? Where did these beliefs? What am I? What to kind of unpack for yourself, to acknowledge and unpack your own principles. Where are you coming from? And and to remind yourself of whatever resources that you already have. And then along the way, to please, please, please reach out to me if you find that there are kind of gaps in your understanding that you want to get filled, or, to keep this conversation going so that we can all together communally build deeper understanding. All of us become more masterful at giving and receiving. So all of the I don't want to say all. I'm sure there are exceptions, but I would say the vast majority of our suffering in relationships with other human beings comes from a failure to recognize the self, where the self ends and the other begins, and where the other ends and the self begins. When those boundaries feel blurry, and when I okay, so let's start with this. Okay, let's start with this, because our meditation practice is super, super essential here. When you find yourself in conflict, when you find yourself in a place where the giving and receiving with the other is not working, something's broken, return to your own direct experience and start to recognize where in this you are either trying to, because there's the self, there's the other, there's the giving and receiving that links us, right? And I should have said this maybe at the top, but giving and receiving could be at all the different levels. I could literally be giving you something, money, a job, something physical. I could be giving my words, my expression to you. I could be giving you an act, a deed. I could be, like I said, mentioned before, like just giving you vibes, just giving you kind of an energy that I walk in the room with. I could be giving you a hug. But that there's the self, there's the other, and then there's the giving and receiving that links us. And so, number one advice when we are learning how to be good at giving and receiving is to bring our attention and our awareness back to our direct experience, back to the zone that we are actually really in charge of, back to the place that is the instrument through which we give and receive. And I'll just kind of just roughly define sort of these two main traps that we can fall into here. One is I am trying to take too much ownership over somebody else's autonomous zone. I'm trying to give in a way too much of my energy or my authority or my power to someone else. And we would call this codependency or enmeshment. When I think that you and I are in a way closer than we are, that's the wrong word, but that some of what I'm in charge of, like I might be giving you in this, I struggled in this in past relationships, runs in my family, this you join, and then instead of two whole individuals who share tasks and role, who, okay, I'll do this role, right? And you do that one. That's fine in relationships. That's partnership. That's okay. But giving away certain things that really only an autonomous being needs to be in charge of. And there's countless ways that we do this, but allowing somebody else to be the one who validates us, making somebody else responsible for aspects of our well-being that they actually can't be fully responsible for because they're not the self getting this direct information from the universe all day long. They don't have access to this arena, and yet I'm trying to give them some kind of, trying to like carve off one of my fiefdoms and kind of give it to them. And then vice versa, me saying I want to be in charge of certain aspects of your life, that because of my limitation and because I'm in this separate form, and this, I'm getting my own information about me over here, I literally can't do that job. And then the other extreme that we see is what we would more often call being selfish or mean or violent, or but one, that what I just described is essentially, it's raga, it's attachment, it's over attachment. Devesha, which is the opposite, which is aversion, is that we do such a great job of projecting our shadow onto the other. We that we envision a separateness that actually doesn't exist. We envision too much separateness between the self and the other. We think of them as, we don't extend to them the selfhood that we've extended to ourselves and maybe our loved ones or other people that look like us or have our political views or whatever, or religious views. And this is a mind that, let me mute that. This is a mind that in that case, and of course, the same person, and this is usually true, I think, the same person can be enmeshed at home and then go get in their car and run across strangers or whoever they've labeled to kind of put the shadow on and be an aversion, right? So, but that's the experience of, keeps unmuting. But that's the version where we see somebody being able to really hurt somebody else or kill somebody else, or to feel empowered to play the universe's role, spirit's role, and deem someone worthy of being here or not, worthy of having rights or not. That begins with that devesha experience. The healing for all of it begins with recognizing what I'm actually in charge of, what I actually know, beginning to recognize that even within my own inner world, everything that I find in here isn't necessarily true. I am awareness, this is true. I'm having these sensory experiences, direct experiences. I can read your names there. I can see that the Zoom is working. I can, right now, yes, sure. If something changed, if the Zoom stopped working, I wouldn't necessarily know why. You know what I mean? If I got really angry in response to that, I might not know immediately why. Well, this is all to say that we've got awareness, we've got direct experience. As we get further from that, we're in story, we're in assumption, we're in we're in the we're basically, we're in that place where the kleshas can be born, where avidya, that's our false stories or, partial stories, can be born. That's where an ego identity is born, raga, devesha, and finally fear, the experience that goes along with believing the stories or believing the falsehoods or believing giving our enmeshment too much power, our raga, giving our aversions too much power, devesha. All of that makes us live in a world that feels where we feel very afraid. Next week, I'm going to wrap this up, but next week, we're going to talk more about, I'm going to be giving actual technique and advice around how to move through how to move through times of conflict with somebody else. How to specifically, we're going to talk about communication a lot next week, or not next week. It's actually 2 weeks from now. We're doing every other week, but yeah, the next talk. How do I communicate with someone in a way that lets them know that I am communicating from a place of, as best as I can, acknowledging my limitations and needs, acknowledging my gifts and what I can offer. How do we communicate in a way that opens up that exchange space of giving and receiving so that the two parties can begin to return to the spaces where they're neither in raga or devesha, where they're neither enmeshed nor opposed. It's neither I can't live without you, all tangled up in my stuff, I can never give you any space, and neither is it I banish you or I hate you or I'm against you. You're my enemy. Getting back into a place of two autonomous whole people. And then what the key is ultimately is acknowledging I can't know about what's going on in your inner world. That's not my job. And I don't even totally know, right? I can come to somebody and say, who I think has done something to hurt me, let's say. I don't even know exactly all the causal things that made me hurt. It could be my history, it could be my context, it could be a bunch of things, right? That added to this, that made me feel this pain. But what I can talk about for sure is I feel this pain. I can sense that directly. And I can say that seeing the way that you're working in this shared reality where I do get to have direct perception of things outside of me, I'm putting this cause and effect here. That's what I'm seeing. And that we can discuss from that place of both humility in a way of saying, I'm limited. This is what I have access to, but also standing really tall in what I do have access to and not belittling what the universe gave me: awareness, an inner world, the ability to think and perceive causation. To be able to share all of that without apologizing. The last thing that I want to say, and I invite any comments, any questions as I close this up. I would love to hear more in general in this next month and change that we have with this theme about what you've discovered about your gifts and your needs. And the last thing that I want to say on this theme is, and maybe it's the most important thing, and maybe it's really just what this whole talk has been all along, and I could have just said it in a much shorter time. I don't know, but you were put here with these gifts and capacities. You were put here with these limitations so that you would have to plug into a world and belong there and have relationships and receive. When this is really natural, that's when we're thriving. That's when we're in the most enlightened version of ourselves at this at this stage, whatever stage you're in, where the gifts that you're giving don't feel super manufactured, effortful, when you recognize that you are already a gift. And one of your gifts, if you're here, is probably you like to keep learning and you like to keep pushing the edges of your understanding and you like to keep growing. Great. Keep doing that. Not because you need to improve necessarily, but because that's also part of your nature. Because it feels right. Because that's what you do. That's a phrase that I started saying when I got back into the theater. And I was recognizing how much I was returning to the theater without all of this ego that I had when I was trying to do it in my 20s in New York City. I would just say, this is what we do. We do this because we like it. We think it's valuable. We think it's a great idea and we enjoy it. Not for all these other reasons that I used to do a lot of things. And find those things that I do this because this is what I do. And start to recognize that in the natural world, that's what everybody's doing. And their gifts are perfect. It's a great time of year to be recognizing that spring as everything's expressing itself so beautifully. And yeah, and just and see in while you're in giving and receiving modes, which is always, but you know, when you can bring your mind to it, and especially when you're finding conflict, as we're going to start to move into that theme next week, big time, next time. How natural can you make that? How much can you trust your gifts? And how much can you trust the receiving? What are the obstacles there? Do you feel that you're worthy of receiving? Do you feel like, you know, receiving from someone is also giving them power? You're receiving this talk from me. You're giving me a platform to sit here and talk to you guys, you know, for over an hour. Yeah, that's you've given me power this morning. Now I'm in your consciousness for this day. So when we receive, we're also giving people others power. Is that scary? Explore where the obstacles are to trusting the giving and the receiving. And share with us what you find. And do your best to, in this crazy world, to find the moments where you can feel grateful for all the beauty and all the love that is here, and to recognize that you are as much a part of it as any blossoming tree. That you are so worthy of the giving and the receiving, and that everyone who shares this world with you is grateful for you. Okay. That's my message for today. So much love.